This podcast is brought to you by Ranch Vision, the software ranchers use to boost profits and make better decisions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Brazil. I am the founder of Ranch Vision. This program was designed for producers like you. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind, forward-looking software program that enables you to see the results of your management decisions months and years into the future, from your herd numbers to your replacement costs, break-even values, enterprise efficiency, your profit and loss, your cash flow, and so much more. With this program, you can move forward with confidence into the future. Ranch Vision isn't a historical record-keeping program like all the other programs you might have seen. It looks forward. It is a very challenging, very competitive industry, and every ranch business is unique, has different variables, different opportunities, different constraints. Ranch Vision was designed to take uncertainty out of your future, to enable you to plan to profit. Please go to our website to learn more, www.ranchvision.io. Grazing livestock and just grazing animals in general are a significant part of the planet. That really is the planet.
The average age of the farmer in America is 58 years old. That is not sustainable.
We've been hit with water curtailments. We've been hit with low prices by the conditions, by the rain, by the lamb crop, by the calf crop.
I heard a Native American gentleman say, wilderness, that's an invention of the white man, because we took care of this land.
Sometimes fighting doesn't mean shouting and screaming and pounding your fist. Sometimes it's just putting your boots on and being there for work the next day.
It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not. I believe in the right of the people.
There are cowboys still around. We just probably don't see them because we're working all the time.
I'm Keely Brazil Cavallo, and this is America on One.
Guys, welcome back to Unwon. I'm here with someone you may recognize. This is Alexandra Fasulo from New York. Alex is sort of the unwilling anti-solar girl right now. She has blown up for telling a story about some of these solar industrial complexes that are coming into rural America. Most of my listeners don't need to be convinced. They're living through this. Alex, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Keely, for having me on. Yeah, I somehow found myself in a place where I flip out about solar panels online every day, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
But you're not anti-solar, to clarify. We were just talking before we started recording about how you use solar panels for your off-grid camping. You have a couple solar panels. You're not anti-solar in theory, but kind of we'll dive into exactly how you've become the face of this movement and why it's essential. But let's start with how this all happened to you. It looks like in about May of last year, we're coming up on a year, a neighbor pulled up into your driveway to introduce himself, and he just kind of happened to mention a massive multinational solar conglomerate moving into your neighborhood. Then you went to a small town meeting, and a California lobbyist showed up at that board meeting, which probably felt a little shocking. I think you're about 3 hours out of New York City, not easy to get to you.
No.
So what were they doing there? Let's talk about it. So take us back to that day in your garden when your neighbor pulled up. What did he say to you, and what was your gut reaction in that moment?
Yeah, so he pulled up. He owns a hayfield across the street from my farm, and it's about 100 acres, one of his different properties that he owns. And he kind of just casually let me know that he had been aggressively approached multiple times, which is a story I've found to be common with everyone I've spoken to, was approached, 3, 5+ times to lease over his hayfield. And I kind of I didn't know much at the time about that. I kind of said, excuse me, what? And he said, yeah, it's for solar. It's for solar leasing, solar development. And they offer you an unbelievable amount of money per acre to lease the land. They offer you way more money than selling the land in the open market. They offer you more money than the crop you're farming on your land. It's kind of shocking, what these people are offering you. Luckily, this guy and his family, they're amazing, they're institution in their own right here. And he said, I would never, ever agree to that. This guy is he's a cool guy. So I said, first of all, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. And after he left that day, since I've been trying to do what I call pollinator farming, which we can talk about, I'm not farming the pollinators, but I'm trying to help with the whole help the native pollinator thing that are, I already knew it was a crisis for the pollinators. I already knew we have a situation with the native bees and butterflies. So then hearing this, I said, okay, whoa, curveball. This kind of relates to what I've been caring about anyway. So I need to sit with this. And I spent that night looking up what he was talking about. I wasn't aware of it at the time, and it kind of opened my eyes up to everything. And I don't think it was even 2 weeks later, a person from my town came to my farm again, got out of their car, and told me about a town board meeting coming up for our town, which is a very rural town. And he said, look, I saw your social media video. I think I know how you feel about these things. If you want to come state your case, we're having a vote on local town legislation we want to pass called a solar facilities law. And I said, okay, sure. So I came a week later, read the speech, and yes, that was when I met the California lobbyist. I guess if there's a timeline in my life, that was definitely a notable day on this journey when, yeah, we're almost 4 hours outside of New York City. There's no easy way to get to my town. It's like, I guess if you flew into Albany, you're still looking at over an hour drive. It's not like we're a suburb of New York City or anything like that. And this guy, who's about my age, I would say, got up to protest our town where we live. This guy didn't live here to protest our town's like little solar facilities law that wasn't necessarily anti-solar. You guys can look, it's online. It's a great little law. They put a lot of time and effort into it, and it basically just put the environment first, which is what these massive solar corporations and ORES, Office of Renewable Energy Siting in New York State, is not doing. The town legislation was factoring in the environment. And I said, well, there's nothing to dislike about this. I'm a fan of factoring in the environment because it's kind of a hypocritical scenario to me to destroy the environment and the habitats and the grasslands and forests that sequester the carbon out of the atmosphere to save the environment doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so I was like, this sounds easy enough to me. I get this. And yeah, this guy from Santa Monica, California, gets up to protest a law trying to be passed in a little town, like not a city, a little town. There was maybe 8 of us sitting there to just paint the picture for everyone. Little town. And this guy's out of California and he has a problem with our town's legislation. And I just, common sense alarms in my head were going, wee woo. Like this is not, I don't like this. This looks like corporate, pillaging going on here. Something nefarious, something not good is up. And the meeting came to an end. We went out to the parking lot and this guy kind of like didn't come after me, in a violent way, but he wanted to have a debate with me. And I was just thinking, this guy's going to pick the wrong person to have a debate with over this right now. Like, it's because I'm only 5'3". I think they think I don't know. He didn't like me by the end of this debate. We left not friends, me and this person, but he kind of got in my face a little bit to say, you're wrong. And I kind of got in his face to say, no, you're wrong. And then I started asking him questions and he was answering them. I'm sure he regrets answering these questions because they were very damning answers. I just said, what are you doing here? Why are you on farmland? Why aren't you putting these panels over like I-87? Why aren't these, overhanging highways or in highway meridians or over parking lots? An obvious talking point everybody asks. And he kind of looked at me and he's like, well, if we did that, we'd have to go through city bodies, city councils. We'd have to go through the Department of Transportation. We'd have to go through New York State. It would take way too long and be way too expensive. That's the key word here that I've learned. Everything has to do with money here. That would be way too expensive. Whereas the cleared open land, they love to call farmland, open land or grasslands, as if there aren't entire ecosystems, animals, people, and food being grown there. But the open land is cleared, ready for the taking. And then he said, I don't know why he said this, smaller towns are basically easier to get to roll over, legislatively for what we want to do here. Because basically this doesn't make financial sense unless it's done at scale. So I was like, what about a Walmart? Well, I've since learned a Walmart's 18 acres. That's not, they don't care about the money of that. They want 3,000 acres at a time. A Walmart is never going to be where they're putting these solar panels. And that gets me to where I am today, where it's not the solar, I call the solar panels the Trojan horse. It's not, I'm not yelling at physical solar panels here. I am sounding the alarm on what has been created using solar panels. And no, big oil is not paying me. I always say that if big oil was paying me, I would buy this land yesterday in Fort Edward. Okay. I would buy all 13,000 acres of this grassland and save it. So no, that's unfortunately not what's happening here. I am just someone who is witnessing it firsthand every day, and anybody listening in from upstate New York can corroborate, it's like ground zero out here with what they're doing with the solar
Yeah.
panels and wind turbines. Yeah.
It seems that way. Yeah, most of the stories I cover are out here in the West, but a lot of my followers are in upstate New York, and they've been
Mhm.
sending me your videos and just saying,
Mhm.
you need to pay attention to this, you need to cover this, because it's very familiar to what we're experiencing anywhere there's open space, which I love that you called that out. It's funny how they call farms open space and solar industrial complexes
Yeah.
solar farms, right? It's kind of the weaponization of language. So you list 3 reasons solar companies target rural towns, which it sounds like you got directly from the horse's mouth from this, this solar
Mhm.
panel lobbyist or employee dispatched to your tiny little town. Didn't know he was going to run into a social media juggernaut there. Probably didn't think that he was going to have a whole lot of pushback. But he openly told you that, here I have them listed. Small governments can't afford legal teams. Rural land is already cleared, and rural landowners often don't know how to navigate complex contracts. And, that may have been his words. It's not so much that we don't know how, it's farmers and ranchers don't have time for these kind of
Right.
drawn out legal battles. They have, as I always say, they have cows to feed, they have, farms to take care of. So they're busy, they're hardworking people. They work day in and day out. So they're kind of easy to pick on. They can't afford lawyers on retainer, and they can't afford the time that it takes to battle these massive companies. So is that kind of the moment, talking to that guy in the parking lot, that this went from I'm concerned to I'm going to fight this full time?
You know, it's like if I could go back, I still there's so much I didn't know yet. So that was like part one. Still at that moment, this was now the summer. I didn't know what the Office of Renewable Energy Siting and Electric Transmission in New York State was. I had no idea that there was this other entity I was going to have a huge problem with. It's my number one problem to this day. I call it ORES, the acronym ORES. That's the office I'm talking about. I didn't know anything about ORES yet. I didn't know the state was steamrolling villages and towns and shoving 3,000 acre solar farms onto communities that didn't approve them. I didn't know any of that yet. I just knew this was just my introduction to the basics of basically, private solar, in the sense that maybe a farmer decides to lease 180 acres of his 600 acres to solar. That was the scale that I knew of it at that time, which is a delicate topic, because then you veer into the conversation of, am I trying to tell landowners what they can and can't do with their land, which I get defensive people on my social media at times writing that to me. I don't think they're totally getting what I'm saying. And I would say to people, I am the last person to be someone who's a fan of big government. That's why I'm flipping out about ORES. I hate big government. I think it's the end of everything good in the world. And I am, trust me, not someone who is into lots of regulations and Big Brother. I'm with you guys. Just trust me on that. With learning about this happening, that this could happen to the field across from my property, it kind of, though, woke me up to the fact of, is this such a private decision that the landowner, the farmer, or the rancher is making, or does this have implications for everybody in the neighborhood and the property surrounding that property? Because again, I think it's one thing for someone to go outside and cut a tree down on their yard. That's do it. I don't want to cut down trees, but do it if you have to. This kind of, at the scale of 100 acres, it just started to get the wheels in my brain going. I looked it up. I'm like, if the field across from my Amish built gorgeous farm that the Amish made unbelievable, like only the Amish could, if there was a solar complex on 100 acres across the street from my farm, wouldn't that lower my property value? I mean, naturally, that's a thought everyone has. Farmers and ranchers, everyone is thinking that, of course. And I look it up. Sure enough, yes, of course, it lowers your property value, kind of for obvious reasons I can get into. And then I started to think about the animals, the pollinators. I was starting to think about what would this do to the life that I'm trying to attract to my farm, that I'm trying to support on my acreage. Could this impact these endangered pollinators? Could this impact these endangered birds? All these things I'm trying to do, I think, could this wreck that? And I started to look into that they spray herbicides under the panels most times to manage the vegetation. People will say to me, no, they don't. No, they don't. Maybe on a 2-acre solar complex, maybe they don't. But I always say to people, you have to conceive how large 3,000 acres is. They're not mowing under 3,000 acres of solar panels. They just want the check. And the fastest way to do that is to sterilize the vegetation under the panels. It makes logical sense to me. And I'm looking at that. Then I'm looking at the chain link fencing that goes up around these complexes, and I've seen it now in person many a time with the danger, high voltage. And then I'm thinking, well, wouldn't that displace, all the wildlife I want coming onto my land? I'm working to invite that. And that was just kind of the research I got into this summer, that this sits at a very interesting cross section between, property rights, personal freedoms, and impacts to the environment, impacts to neighbors, to communities, to view sheds, which no one really talks about how crushing that is to destroy. Country roads take me home to the place, that flies out the window the second you're staring at 100 solar panels. It just does. And
Yeah.
all of that's happening, right? And then, okay, so then September rolls around. I still don't know what ORES is at this point. I'm just researching. My background as a freelance writer is I like to research and read and write anyway. So, no one's forcing me to do that. I just am a weirdo who likes to do that. Fast forward to September, I'm in Tractor Supply, and a woman I don't know, who has since become my good friend, comes up to me and was like, I've seen your videos. You know, we chat for a while, she and she said, I think you're going to want to come to a hearing happening upstream from you. I'm on the Hudson River, and Schuylerville and Fort Edward is just one town upstream. She's like, I think you're going to want to come to a solar hearing happening in Fort Edward in a few weeks. I'm going to tell you why. And I was like, okay, why? I'm listening. And she kind of gave me the introduction into ORES. I still didn't get what that meant. Again, I have no background in like electricity, grid maintenance. These are all still flying over my head. Like I don't really still know what anyone's talking about at this point. And she said they're trying to put in, 100 megawatt. I still didn't know what that meant at the time. I now know that means 800 acres. Like, man, what I have learned. But she said they're trying to put in a huge solar industrial complex into Fort Edward, upstream from your farm. And I said, say no more. I'll be there. And I went. I brought my mom and my best friend with me, and we sat with this new woman I'd met. And it was in a church, the hearing. I feel like there's been so many very poetic, interesting, I don't know what you want to energetic crossovers here. I'll put it that way. And this meeting kicks off. I already have like a million problems with this meeting, and no one's even spoken yet. So also background on me, 10 years ago, I did work for the New York State Assembly out of Albany, New York. For a year and a half, I wrote press speeches and things for the Minority Conference of the Assembly. And I went to college for political science. So I'm not claiming to be someone who had no political background, or suddenly I've discovered I like, causing political problems. Like I will admit, I went to school for political science, so no one's going to like gotcha me with that. But I come in, I already do not like bureaucrats ever. I don't like bureaucracy. I think, again, it's a poison on democracy and
Amen.
everything else. I have a huge problem with it. So I go
We're
in and
the
I'm
same
like,
in that way,
yeah,
Alex.
it's a
I
huge
feel the same exact way.
it's a scourge on free society, because these are people we didn't vote into office. That's all you kind of have to say. But I walk in, and there's a table, at the front, and there's two people sitting at the table in their little blazers. And there was a car out in the parking lot that said the Department of Public Service, which in New York State, if it's a government vehicle, they put their logo right on it. So I was like, all right, so New York State, Albany has dispatched these two bureaucrats to come sit at this table. They probably don't want to be here. I'm sure they don't want to be here. And they have to write down all of our grievances we're about to go say, at this podium. And the hearing kicks off. These two people start speaking. I learned that they are administrative law judges. I didn't know what that meant. I thought that meant then that they were real judges. I have since learned administrative law judges are not real judges, and that is an important thing for people to know across the country right now. They are administrative employees that happen to preside over a certain amount of information. Anyway, these two ALJs, I call them, get started and they do their New York State, we care what you think, okay, yeah, right. And then I'm thinking all this time that we were going to get a chance at the podium to engage New York State about what's happening to our communities. Surely, that's why they're here, right? These people then end their little spiel with, we cannot address them. We cannot speak to them. We cannot ask them a question. We can't ask the corporation, Boralex, a question. Boralex isn't present. We basically can just go up to the podium and share why we're upset and sit down. And I was like, I see what's happening here. I don't like this one bit. And it was a very interesting evening.
How are they able to dictate how the public comments to them? We don't live in a monarchy.
Well, what's funny, since then, since I've called that out on social media, I went to another hearing recently a month ago for another town south of mine, and they have changed their opening spiel after I called that out. And they don't tell you can't do that anymore, but they also still don't engage you, though. So if you still try and look them in the face and say, I have a problem with this, they still don't open a dialogue with you. I mean, they're very they're very above you. And some of these town hearings they let us have that they preside over, they'll sit in the town board members' chairs, above everyone, and they hold court, as I say, and they let the serfs come before them.
Yeah, right.
Offer your 10% of your crop, and maybe we'll let you go back to your fiefdom. Yeah, no, it truly is that. I mean, it's like I half laugh about it because it's crazy, but it's like it really is that. I mean, and that is, again, why I'm freaking out online every day, because through the Trojan horse of the solar and wind, they've created a religion where people are like at the altar of this concept. They are devouring our state's home rule for breakfast. And they're doing it so sneakily because nobody wants to attack green energy, clean energy, saving the climate. Like, those are concepts that you don't want to be seen attacking that. And, I had to think about that when I decided to really start flipping out about this in October. I was like, well, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this because they've done a really good job of brainwashing people about it. And I have gotten a lot of hate. I've had someone trespass on my farm. I've had to call the cops. I've had to block a fair amount of humans. But, along the way, people also stop being hateful to what I'm saying too. And I think because this is affecting so many communities countrywide, what I am saying is not made up. And so many people get on my posts and go, you guys, look at my backyard, and they'll post all, their pictures and stuff. Anyway, the hearing ends and nearly 90% of people in the room didn't want this complex. They let it be known. So again, I'm still naively thinking democracy's at work here. And I was like, okay, well, if 90% of the town doesn't want this, if the town itself doesn't want this, well, then that's the end of this. Thank God. Thank God. Well, here we are. We're within probably 3 weeks of them approving the final permit for Fort Edward Solar. Attorneys, nonprofits, PhD ecologists have all gone on the record. We submitted an environmental assessment proving how unsuitable the site is. None of it matters. None of it matters. And that's why I have to raise money to sue them. So,
wow, that's
crazy.
And the people spoke, and they were not heard here.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And you dug through 350 documents on the ORIS website. You say you found that every environmental impact survey for Fort Edward Solar has been fully redacted, correct? No public access to information about endangered species impacts. It's all been redacted. Can you walk us through that? And then, you next commissioned your own independent scientific study
Yeah.
when the state's data was hidden, which I think is brilliant. Can you tell us what you saw when you tried to get information about endangered species impact and what led you to end up funding your own research?
Yeah, so pretty much just in case they try to sue me, I won't speak in absolutes. Pretty much every document in the ORES docket that touches on the environment, the endangered species, the take rate, what, they expect to die, which they can pay mitigation payments for. They can just set money aside somewhere in exchange for however many endangered species is going to die, which just, I still haven't been able to understand that one yet. And pretty much every single document that touches on the environment at Fort Edward has either redactions or is completely redacted. They like to say they're using the environmental conservation law to do such a thing. There is an environmental conservation law that allows for redactions for a very, very specific reason that is not, something that's occurring everywhere. And that would be to redact the GPS coordinates of breeding sites, nesting sites for these certain species, if these are species that don't exist elsewhere. So pretty much the idea of this law is if you have one 10-acre patch where one species lives and that's it, pretty much if someone gets in there and shoots all of the species, and that's they're extinct type of thing. That's the idea behind the law. It's being misused grossly here. They're not only, redacting nesting sites, all that, they're redacting just the species name, the presence of the species, the descriptions of the species, the habitat information. They're redacting archaeological findings, which has nothing to do with that law whatsoever. They're redacting water quality information, water table, Hudson River. They're redacting prime farmland taking from USDA classified prime farmland soil, all of that. They're redacting that. So they took, you gave them an inch, they truly took 500 miles with that inch, and it's unlawful. And no one can sue me for saying that because it truly is unlawful. I've spoken to enough attorneys to know it's unlawful. They are misusing a law here. And so I tried to find the unredacted information because that pissed me off. I don't like, it's how everyone feels with the Epstein files and stuff. It's like no human wants to see all these black boxes on stuff that is sensitive information, and you get upset. So I went on a wild goose chase. I went to the village of Fort Edward clerk's office where there were supposed to be records of this. I went to the town of Fort Edward clerk's office. Records, oh, it's redacted there. Oh, I put the USB in my laptop. Oh, it's redacted there. I go to the town of Fort Edward library where it's supposed to be. Oh, it's redacted. I go to the Washington County clerk's office. Oh, it's redacted. Last thing we have to do, my mom came with me, is go to Albany and try and meet with ORES where they claim they have these files and go see them there for myself. So I tried to make an appointment with ORES. They don't pick up the phone. There isn't really a phone. You can't leave a voicemail. Eventually they set one up after I've let it be known. You leave a voicemail, they don't call you back. You email, they don't email you back. You cannot make an appointment with them, which means you can't see the files. So I was in Albany. We went to where their office supposedly is. I know the inner workings of Albany from when I worked there. We went to the desk person the first time, and they were really sketchy. They would not let us up. Weirdly enough, 2 months later, ORES announced it moved its office location, even though it's been in existence since 2020. I don't know why that would be. I tried to visit it, and then they moved it a month and a half later. So we went to the desk person and the new location. And I wasn't even there 30 seconds until I call it a handler was dispatched out of the elevator to escort me out. I've since learned that I think they, have marked me an agitator or a potentially dangerous person for trying to make an appointment to see documents about dead short-eared owls. That always just tells you there's something's up here. Something is not following the protocol that it is supposed to follow. So anyway, I never saw the unredacted files, which gave me the idea for the environmental assessment.
Yeah, these people are supposed to work for us. This is a government agency. Just to remind people, this is not a corporation. ORES is a government agency that works for the state. And yet you can't access anyone who works there or any of the information that they're using to make these decisions. And ORES according to reporting, can override local zoning laws entirely. And most small towns don't have the legal budget to fight back. So how is this playing out in communities across New York? Is anybody in your state government listening to you?
So it took about 4 months of me flipping out online to catch the attention of some of the current legislators in Albany, assembly members, and state senators. And to this date, they have sent the Republican conferences of the Assembly and the Senate have sent letters to ORES demanding transparency, which is amazing, and I've thanked all of them for that. The Assembly representative in Fort Edward, which she's in the Democratic Party, wrote her own letter that she submitted directly on the docket expressing similar concerns. So there is a slight bipartisan element here, which should be
As there should
powerful.
be. Right.
As there should be.
It's about transparency in the environment. It's not about is
Yeah,
green energy good or bad. It's about small town,
absolutely.
you know, having their representation and their rights. This is really should be bipartisan, you would think.
It really should be. Part of how we got in this mess in the first place is the lack of balance in the New York State legislature. It's been one party rule for far too long, and people would get on here and yell at me for saying that. But I would challenge you. I would say, I would also say the same if it was one party rule on the right as well. It's when you have no balance in anything ever, including in nature, it's not good. Nature will always restore balance. We haven't had balance in our legislature in far too long in the state of New York. And, this is something that can unfortunately occur when that happens. And, it started in 2019 with the Climate Act that they passed here with zero forethought, zero planning in the technicality of what this would do, rolling out such targets that they are now admitting, the governor's admitting are impossible to hit. And I don't know why we didn't have that, we didn't think about that in 2019, because along the way, what I'm trying to defend here are our towns and villages that are kind of just pawns. They're being used as like collateral damage in these politicians trying to pretend that like what they did in 2019 wasn't incredibly destructive, haphazard. It was incredibly irresponsible. And it was them just passing something that sounded good. It's just virtue signaling in the worst way because there's no accountability, there's no checks and balances on these people. So it's like, this is what happens, unfortunately, when you
Yeah.
take one party and you don't challenge it for 25 years. Other bad
No,
things
I'm in
can come out of the
California.
party. Yeah,
I get it. I'm in California. So
yeah,
I talk about it all the time.
yeah,
It's too much power, just brings out the worst in human nature, unchecked
it
power,
does.
unchallenged power. You start to see things like this. And to that point, when you did commission your own environmental study, it showed some pretty concerning results. Do you want to talk about what you found?
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, that shocked me. So when I approached this nonprofit Hudsonia Limited to write this, I knew they were regarded, very highly. Them also being a Hudson River, type of group. I was thinking this is perfect. The guy there, the PhD ecologist, he's a professional wetland scientist. Man, if you see his resume, it's insane. Like you couldn't be a more accomplished scientist. So I was like, okay, a lot of people are going to fight me on this, so I want to get the best of the best to do this. I want to make sure this is, real science, this is real everything. And so these guys were perfect for that. And they did it over the course of a couple months. And again, I'm not claiming to be a PhD ecologist here. So I just thought this report would at least name the species that we're dealing with that are endangered and threatened at this grasslands. I thought it would talk about this is probably not a suitable site for a solar complex. There's, probably not great. I did not expect all of the rest that came out in it. When I read it in February, I think my mouth was open. Like I think I was sitting at my laptop going, "Oh my God. Oh my God." And I could go on for 4 hours about what came out in that, but to just give people some highlights, besides the fact that this is a protected and designated grassland habitat that is regarded as one of the last of its kind in the entire Northeast, if you take it out, it will result in landscape level ecological loss, it's called. That occurs when the ecological loss is of hundreds of miles in nature. It spills out into other states, or in our case in New York, other countries. It would spill out into Canada. That alone should be enough to stop this, right? I would like to think so.
Right.
the geotechnical aspects that came out. Again, I didn't know a lot about this before I had to learn about this. There's a fault line under this that the developers environmental assessment that they get to purchase that ORES doesn't vet. So of course it's favorable to development. I mean, obviously it's like these people want money. This is so common sense to me if you're not going to vet it. They just left that out of their assessment. There's no mention of the Smith Basin fault just anywhere. And it's like, okay, maybe if you were building a house that's 1,000 square feet, maybe you don't need to know that. When we're talking about 1,800 acres, like massive industrial complex, massive infrastructure, piles being driven 14 feet into the earth, like you probably should discuss such a thing, I would think. Not an engineer, I would think that should be mentioned. Not an
Makes
engineer,
sense.
but
Yeah.
would make sense. He goes on to uncover the shale itself is too soft to bear the piles going in. Okay, great. The pyrite down in there, well, I guess it oxidizes with oxygen and incinerates steel and concrete. It like melts it. It's not meant to come into contact with oxygen down there. So that already would make unstable, very heavy infrastructure that's wobbling. Okay. And then the soil itself is slumping soil. And so many people in Fort Edward have, backed this up. It's not great soil actually for some types of farming. It's very, very heavy clay, dense, as he describes it, slumping soil, prone to landsliding, moving, slumping, all that. So they kind of uncover in this assessment that, like, hey, if it were to rain a lot for a couple days and there were to be extreme weather or a little activity at that fault line, which I guess historically is a very active fault line, like its entire existence, we've been studying it, you would definitely have a pretty expensive cleanup situation going on there. That, like it's incredible that hasn't been discussed or uncovered.
Well, you're in upstate New York, so you probably don't get much weather up there, right? You should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, right. No, it's sunny every day here. It's super sunny. It's really nice weather here. I always love to say it's like we rank in the top cloudiest regions of the entire country. That's just like
Oh,
the
perfect
kicker.
place to put an 1,800
Yeah.
acre
Super
solar farm.
sunny. Yeah, so
Yeah.
everyone's in a great mood and really tan here and not sarcastic at all. Yeah. That was just some of it. I mean, they go on. It's crazy. Like part of this facility site would border the Hudson River, and it happens to be the part of the Hudson River where the PCB meltdown occurred with General Electric. I believe RFK was on the scene for that 30 years ago. It was the Hudson Falls Fort Edward section of the Hudson River, and they tried to clean it up. And it was labeled like a failure of an environmental remediation program, and they kind of just abandoned it in a way, and it's acknowledged that there are PCBs all in the soil there, all in the riverbank. It's known, it is known. And that happens to be the exact section they would be, you know, excavating for this. And the scientists note PCBs can travel in water, soil, air, I think air. I could be wrong. Soil and water, I know, and they kind of again paint the scenario of it's kind of impossible that the PCBs won't be mobilized when you guys do this. And then I'm just like, okay. I mean, like the Environmental Protection Agency was in upstate New York to help with that. And that was a major national story. And we all joke the poor Hudson River is taking quite a beating in its life. It's terrible. You can probably hear my just
Yeah, it's understandable.
with all of
Frustration.
this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it must be so frustrating not only to have to find all of this out yourself, but also to watch your neighbors go through this. I mean, you talk about being near an Amish community, and I wanted to get into this a little later, but just to, kind of put a fine point on it. The Amish notoriously don't go online and advocate for themselves. So you're kind of their voice. So when you get criticism for dictating what landowners do, I don't see it that way at all. And I don't think anyone reasonable would. You're asking for transparency and more information. People can do with this information what they want to. But the fact that it's being hidden shows that there's some competing interests at play. And I wonder, I don't want you to, speculate if you're not comfortable with it, but What do you think the relationship is here? Do you think ORES members are getting kickbacks? Do you think this is purely ideological? People who are just very passionate about green energy? What do you think is at the root of this, if you were to guess?
I think I almost know, and for sake of living to see another year, because it is actually that bad and that dangerous to discuss like the root of it. I think we have a situation where all of the bureaucrats and some of our elected officials in New York State have been completely co-opted by foreign interests. And I think I have said this in my post, foreign interference in upstate New York. And you would just know that based on the fact that commercial solar only generates at 15% of its potential in upstate New York. It has not fixed our grid. In New York, our electric bills doubled this year. It's in the form of a delivery charge, which, if you look that up, yeah, we're socializing the rollout of failed wind and solar. And this past winter, when we had a blizzard for a week up here, if you look at the real time New York Independent State Operator dashboard, it shows you the real time where the energy is coming from. And when we need it most in this climate, which is during blizzards in January, we're all okay in July here. It was at 0% commercial solar. So the whole point of adding reliable energy to a grid is that it needs to be reliable when you need it. And we
Yeah.
need it most in the middle of January when it's at 0%. And the dashboard showed it stayed at 0% for weeks after because of the snow coverage on the panels. It didn't go above freezing here. For anyone listening that isn't familiar with upstate New York, it might as well be the Arctic Circle, honestly. It didn't go above 32 degrees Fahrenheit for almost 2 months.
Wow.
If you can picture how cold that is, the snow doesn't melt off the panels, it just stays put. And we had a really cold winter here, like exceptionally cold, and it stayed put. And again, 3,000 acres of panels, no one's removing that snow, I promise. Every complex I visit, there's not a single person on staff attending to them, watching them, monitoring them. I looked that up for Fort Edward Solar because a lot of the unions lie and they say, solar creates jobs. If you look it up on the DPS documents for Fort Edward Solar, it admits it creates 2.5 full-time equivalent jobs. 2.5 jobs are created by a solar
Wow.
complex, but then it takes out all of the local small businesses, tourism. I've spoken with people who do bird watching, tours, environmental tours, hot air balloon companies, homes for, people that like all of it will be destroyed for 2.5 full-time equivalent jobs though.
So this
Yeah.
does absolutely nothing for our American small towns. This destroys
Yeah.
our view shed. It destroys prime farmland in many cases. It does not generate jobs. It hurts tourism. This is setting aside all of the very fair questions about toxic leak and what is in these solar panels. When you say foreign interference, China, what countries do you think are behind this?
Well, I mean, it's not really a conspiracy because, like, if you look up again, on the ORES dashboard, you look at the corporations that are going to be the ones installing these wind and solar complexes in upstate New York, more than half of them are not American companies. Almost all of them come from Canada, Denmark, and Spain. It's just right there to see. And it took me one day to research that and figure it out. Here at Fort Edward, we're dealing with Canadian companies. They are not American companies. And Boralex, that we've been dealing with for a year, was recently acquired by Brookfield Asset Management, another Canadian company, a much bigger one that happens to be where the current Prime Minister of Canada used to be a vice president of assets.
Interesting.
They questioned him before their House Ethics Committee this past November, very recently, about the conflicts of interest that he has serving as their prime minister and his ties to Brookfield. Well, somehow Brookfield now owns, 2,000 acres of leases to land in Fort Edward, New York. I think that's inappropriate. I think it deserves more scrutiny. I'd like to see scrutiny from the federal government on this because it just doesn't sit well with me. One of the largest renewable conglomerates in the world is going to own our prime farmland and access to our water. And that's happening at all of these projects. So it's not just Brookfield. There's Invenergy. There is Hecate is a Spanish company. They're meddling in a bunch of our projects. And I think when these companies aren't American, they don't care about our land. They don't care about our animals. They don't care about our wildlife. They don't care about our culture. So many of the Indian nations of upstate New York have protested these complexes because it's on their burial grounds. Their artifacts are there. They've found bones, and they're saying, we don't care. We don't care because they're not American companies. I'm not saying that in a,
Right.
oh, I dislike foreigner type of way. I'm saying it in a just think about that. Just think it's not their country. It's not their
Well,
wildlife.
it's the same reason why you had questions when a California lobbyist showed up at your small village board
Yes.
meeting in New York. If you're not from the area, you don't have the accountability. You don't have to look your neighbor in the eye and explain why you put this solar monstrosity in their backyard. You
Right.
don't have to watch the degradation of wildlife and biodiverse plants and native plants. You know, I asked about China because we do know that 80 to 85%, I just looked it up, of all solar panels worldwide are made in China.
Yes.
China does not rely on solar, though. They're too smart for
No.
that. They're smarter than these Western countries that are virtue
Uh-huh.
signaling by hurting their own people with these foolish projects. And we found there, I'm looking at a headline from May of last year, rogue communication devices found in Chinese made solar power inverters. So there's a
Mhm.
real question about national security when we
Yes.
start bringing this infrastructure in from a country that is not friendly to us. And like you said, a lot of these companies are owned by other countries. And it is appalling that a state agency like ORES that purportedly would represent the interests of New Yorkers has no interest in divulging information that impacts their lives and their homes. These open questions exist. Questions that, like you said, anyone would ask. Why are we letting this foreign company into our backyard? What are we getting for this? Who's
Right.
benefiting? And I'm just thinking of you mentioned archaeological information that was redacted in these reports. Who knows if that's burial grounds, if this is stuff that these tribes deserve to know. What have they found and why
Right.
aren't they being open about it?
I mean, at Horseshoe Solar, which is out in Rush, New York, and Caledonia, New York, I stay in contact with the folks out there. They're building it as we speak, and it was presented. They are aware that it is a Seneca Nation burial ground that they are drilling inside of. So they
Wow.
were made aware of it. The state even acknowledged that they know that and they're doing it anyway.
Wow.
That's my alarm here is I have watched every single argument attorneys have tried. I've watched everyone try everything with ORES, and it's a runaway train. I don't know a better analogy to describe it as. It's very, very alarming. It really is. Yeah.
So after you couldn't get any of your calls returned, you took this fight on yourself. You built a legal war chest, American Land Rescue Fund. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Why you decided a nonprofit was the right vehicle for this fight?
Yeah, I thought because the people would write to me on Facebook where I actually write the most about this every day, and they would say, set up a GoFundMe. I don't know. I want to fund whatever you're doing. You seem pissed off and passionate and knowledgeable, and I want to help. And I was thinking, my background working for myself, I was like, well, I want to at least help these people be able to write this off. I want this, they should at least be able to claim it as a donation. So that was kind of the idea for starting the 501, C3. Along the way, though, it's like I'm glad I have it because it's very expensive to pursue anything if you want to go up against a state. This isn't against a town. This isn't even against a
Right.
corporation. This is going up against New York State. It's not just any old state. It's the Empire State. It's quite the
Mhm.
state, for better or for worse. I created the nonprofit specifically to raise money to fund lawsuits against governmental overreach as it relates to home rule, town zoning, and the environment. And it's resonated with a lot of people. And it's been really very touching to see the amount of people who have donated is unbelievable. It's really been, for all the bad people out there, there really are so many good. Like this country is still so it's so good. It's full of such good people that don't necessarily know how to use social media like I do or don't necessarily feel comfortable hiring attorneys. And I always say that's okay. I have no problem doing it. I have no problem doing that. And I'm happy to do it for them because these people these farmers, these homesteaders, these nature lovers, like, they deserve it. They really do. There's a lot of good people.
I resonate with that so much, and I love that you're doing this for folks. Like you said, this isn't really something that directly impacts you in the sense that your immediate community is safe. You're doing this because you're raising the alarm about a problem that is not just a New York problem, as you've said. People from around the country are writing to you, begging for help.
Yeah.
What's the common thread you're hearing from communities in other states dealing with wind and solar projects like this in rural areas?
I'm noticing a lot of similarities. A lot of people are writing to me about battery storage and data centers as well, which is relevant to all
Yeah.
of this because they are all
Hmm.
going to be connected in the end. All four, wind, solar, battery, data, are absolutely all connected to each other. They'll be writing to me from towns. A lot of people have written to me from Oklahoma and Idaho. Missouri, that it all starts at the local level, and they'll kind of, local people who've lived in their towns their whole lives will notice a change, a bad taste in the air, and they'll kind of notice it'll start with their town board. So some of these town boards become compromised. Some board members get paid off. Some board members get in on the take, and they kind of notice, their town that's always looked out for it is all of the sudden courting a data center. And then they'll tell me, we got the whole town to go to the hearing last week, and we all protested the data center to the town board, and the town board turned around and screwed us. I'm hearing that a lot, which makes me sad and upset because that's happening at a local level, and I don't want to like attack local level government. But the money involved with this green energy beast, that is coming out of other countries, the money is so inconceivable that they are able to compromise anybody they want, and they do.
Yes.
And they are compromising people on town boards. And that's when I start to get humans that will write to me, alarmed. Another thing that I'm seeing, I'll share this for anyone listening. This is highly alarming. This is happening in the town below mine right now. They're trying to change zoning. The zoning board is trying to change zoned agricultural land to zoned conservation land. Now, at first, why this is so smart? Does not sound great. Oh, conservation. Oh, birdies, bird baths. We're gonna save the animals. I'm a conservationist. Get this. So when you change zoning, from residential agriculture, which is what my farm zoned as, when you change it to open space conservation, you change it to a zoning that allows for parks, for conservation stuff, and somehow green energy is allowed. And then guess what? If green energy is allowed, all of a sudden battery storage is allowed. They're dealing with this in the Adirondack State Park, which a lot of people do know countrywide. I think it's the largest park in the country, even though it's not a national park. The Adirondack Park's just north of me. They're dealing with them trying to put battery storage in what is supposed to be forever wild. Adirondack State Park has always been known as you can't touch it. It's always a joke. Like the DC will arrest you if you like pick a wrong flower in it. This zoned conservation zoning is a huge problem. It's own Trojan horse. They're doing it to open the doors to green energy, to the transmission lines. If anyone is listening to this, if your town is trying to suddenly switch from zoned ag to zone conservation, sound the alarm. It is that serious. It's not good if someone is trying to do that, and they're dealing with it around my town. And then if you look it up, sure enough, it's because in 2 years they want to put a battery storage there, but they trick people along the way. That's what I have a problem with. There's a lot of lying, a lot of propaganda,
Yes.
lying and tricking and preying on people's lack of knowledge going on here. And like you said, it's unfair because a lot of these people that have a lack of knowledge, it's not because they're stupid, it's because they're busting their ass to grow food and care for animals, and they're preying on that. Sorry, my finger's going right now. They're preying on that, and I have a massive problem with that. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's another abuse of language. They're using the term conservation
Yes.
to describe a corporate interest. The report that you commissioned concluded, we believe the applicant and the agencies are concealing critical biodiversity information to expedite approval. Couldn't get more black and white than that. And there's a lot of that happening. You also quote an energy expert. I believe I read this on your Substack, which is excellent. People should check it out. House of Green.
Yeah, thank you.
Substack. Yes. You have a huge audience already, but for folks in the West, this is happening all over. It's not just a Western issue. So I think I read this quote on your Substack. Energy expert Robert Bruce said, developers have decided that rural Americans don't matter. And they're
Mhm.
coming for rural America because we are smaller and we don't have as much of a voice. And they think it's easy. They think it's just open space there for the taking. So I think a big message out of what you're saying is to get involved in your local politics. Who's on your town board? Who are your county commissioners?
Mhm.
And pay attention to these kinds of things, and don't let them abuse language like conservation zoning. Know what that means.
Yeah.
People are lying pretty egregiously
Mhm.
in this issue. So the Amish company that built your farm, you've talked about them a lot. You've become very close with this community. They're threatened by these same solar projects that you're fighting. Can you tell us a little bit about what their reaction is and how they're coping with these changes right around their communities?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what gets me more upset, the animals or them doing this to the Amish, because it's like both of them are these pure entities that don't use the internet and haven't been corrupted by our modern world, and it just infuriates me. But so where they are, they're in Montgomery County. I'm in Saratoga County. Montgomery County, like it's a common story for a handful of counties in New York State. They love the more rural, lower socioeconomic counties. Favorite target of theirs. Saratoga County is not lower socioeconomically because of Saratoga Springs and the race course and the lake. There's a lot more, money floating around. So they haven't really bothered my county yet because there's rich people on lakes here that would flip out. Well, there's not really in Montgomery County, not in that way. There's people farming in Montgomery County. There's people working. There's Amish. There's people walking to school in Montgomery County, and that's a favorite, absolutely favorite place for them to target. They have targeted Montgomery County so egregiously that if they are able to install all of the commercial solar that they want to in that county, it totals over 22,000 acres, which is almost 9% of all of the land in the county. Their local politicians have said if they are successful with that, there will not be a single view shed left in any direction you look in if they are successful. My Amish live outside of Canajoharie, New York, and their community is being surrounded. You have Flat Creek Solar, you have Mohawk Solar, you have Mill Point Solar just down towards Glen, New York, and it's disgusting. It's thousands upon thousands of acres of solar panels. Obviously, the Amish don't like that. I don't know if I, the Amish don't live, if anyone doesn't know, with technology or electricity specifically. They don't want to be beholden to it. I think a lot of people today are realizing maybe they weren't so wrong about that, all the last centuries they've been living without it. But the Amish don't want to live near that. The Amish don't believe in that. The Amish don't want their children walking past that to their schools. They have submitted Anabaptist expert studies out of Montgomery County, excellent, done by Stephen Nolt, who is regarded nationally as an Anabaptist scholar, did a study for them out there to describe what this would do to their communities. It's long. There's a lot of really interesting things, but same with the wildlife with the Amish, it would fragment their habitat. Fragment their community. They have to get around on foot, they have to get around on horse and buggy. And what a lot of people don't realize with these solar complexes is you might think it's like one clean cut box is boom, 800 acres. That's all, folks. And it's not at all. If you look it up, this is what causes it to be more than the acreage they tell you it's going to be. They, in my opinion, lie about that because they're not talking about the actual footprint of what's going to go on, setbacks and access roads and all that. It's like a patchwork. If you hear 800 acres, if you look at a map, it's all over the place, all over the place. So the 600 acres of panels is, if you put a rectangle or a box around it, is really like 2,500 acres. And that type of installation fragments wildlife, and it fragments a community that has to get around, such as the Amish community. And the Amish communities in Montgomery County are formidable in size. They are not, three families that jumped in the covered wagon, last year. and decided to head up north. They are legitimate large communities of established Amish businesses that are the best in the area. I always say to people, 30 years from now, the Amish are going to be the last people feeding us in this country. I know there are Gen X and millennial farmers out there, thank God, trying to pick up where we're going to be left off here with the farmers that are retiring or passing on right now. But I do always joke, 30 years from now, I don't think you want to run the Amish out of your state, because I think they're going to be a major group still feeding us, really feeding us. And they can do it without electricity. They do it with their horses. Obviously they need, I don't support the Amish that are rude to their horses, which is not a large percent. Everyone always says that. The group in Canada take very great care of their animals, and they are the best people in the world. And they are concerned. They are upset. They had that Anabaptist study done. They went to some of these hearings, which the Amish don't like to do, that they're a passive people. They went to the hearings, they submitted comments, the Amish did. And I always say, if the Amish are doing that, you should know it's bad. It's bad when the Amish are getting up at town hall meetings, and they tried. They tried like hell. And Mill Point and Flat Creek got their rubber stamp in the last 3 months. Luckily, the county attorney in Montgomery County, there's a lot of really amazing people out there that are going to be suing, that are going to be taking action here. And I'm coordinating with their nonprofits as well to help fund their efforts. So I'll be reporting on that if anyone's listening. We are investing in the lawsuits there as well, because I'm not going to leave the Amish hanging ever.
Good for you. Good
Yeah.
for you. Let's talk really quickly, just because your backstory is so interesting. You came into this, you're a first generation farmer.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into this. You have a pollinator farm. Um, I want to hear
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah, so, people fight me online and say I can't call myself a farmer because I don't sell $10,000 worth of crops every year. And if that's the definition you want to go off, I'm working on it. I just freaking started this 2 years ago, so cut me some slack. But I ran a freelance writing business for nearly a decade. I worked off my laptop. I lived in New York City for a bit. And I just kind of hit a point where I wanted to do the opposite of all of that. I didn't want to sit inside anymore. I didn't want to sit at my laptop. I didn't want to sit, period. I didn't want to look at screens. I wanted to go outside. I have always loved nature and animals my whole life. I was raised with ponies and chickens and ducks. So that wasn't like a new concept to me. I had moved to Florida in 2020 for a bit, discovered it just was not for me. No hate to Florida, was not for me. Came back, decided I was like, I'm ready to live and die in New York State, for better or for worse. Call me crazy for doing that. I just felt the call to come back here. And I was like, all right, what's the opposite of what I just did for 9 years? Starting a farm, probably. And also thinking about how poisoned a lot of the food in our grocery stores is, all the usual stuff like millennials are concerned about. I am as well. And that kind of, planted the seed, haha, in my brain to get into all of this. And one of the first videos I posted was that I got a loan for my land through the farm credit system. And that blew up. People were like, "What's farm credit? You mean you got a loan for undeveloped farmland? You can do that?" And I didn't know at the time. I thought you needed cash to do that. I didn't know that. And I thought I knew a little bit about real estate. I didn't know that. And I started to make finance content around farming, around buying land and what to do with scouting land, qualifying land, buying it, because I had kind of a background in finance, and that really resonated with people. I think there wasn't, I guess, many people talking about, the crossover of farming and finance. And so I was like, okay, I'm happy to fill that role if you guys want me to. And I just learned more about farm credit stuff, went to some of their seminars. I started to learn more about USDA loans so I could report on that. I applied for USDA grant money for conservation work. I was thinking about kind of doing like regenerative farming along with like conservancy, education, crossover, the usual like classic millennials, whatever. And I was like, yeah, this sounds good. I opened a farm stand, started selling little, no, it wasn't $10,000 of crops, but, again, working on it, just me, no tractor here. And I wanted to kind of document the process of farming without a tractor so that it's relatable to people or single females out there. take people through the process of what small farming looks like. I do think it's better for the environment if we get more little hubs in our communities as opposed to massive corporate farming. I was like, I'll be my own case study. I'm going to show people what I can do. And mind you, I'm only
Wow.
heading into my we can't farm 6 months out of the year in this climate. So mind you, I am only heading into my second like true season of farming. So I would say to people, give me a damn minute. My God,
I mean,
give me 3
I'm
years.
I'm in
Like,
awe.
geez,
I love what you're doing. I mean, yeah, we really need more young people coming into farming. So
yeah,
I,
like,
yeah, I hope that you've gotten some. I know you've gotten a good response on social media because a lot of my followers have sent me your videos and appreciate what
yeah,
you're doing. We need more skill sets of folks who don't just know how to farm, they can get off the farm and talk about it. Otherwise, we are going
yes.
to go extinct. So,
Oh my God, exactly. And I'm happy to be that person. And I always say to people, don't you think I want the tax breaks that come from having more land and selling $10,000 worth of crops? Yes, I do. So trust me, I'm going to get there. And when I do, I'm going to write a blog about it. But I do say, it's like with gardening and farming, it's not instant gratification. That is, they say what's so great for your brains. Everything we do today is such instant gratification. This is such a slow thing. I see it's gonna take me probably
right.
5 years to, um, hit a point where I'm making $10,000 in profit off of things sold off of my land, and that's just the reality of it, and I'm not ever trying to misrepresent it to people and make it seem like you can do that in your first year. Maybe you can, okay, if you have a tractor, but I'm doing this tractorless, and along the way, a pollinator element started to come into it 'cause I do love all animals. I love bugs. I am the person who will put a spider on the ground if I'm about to, dig through a garden bed. Like, yes, that is me. 100%. I love animals. I'm a simp for all I love bugs. I like bugs. And I started to learn about we have a serious situation with the pollinators, and if the pollinators go, we're toast. So, this ended up like an advocacy meets homesteading meets pollinators meets industrial solar sprawl all rolled into one. I haven't figured out a good elevator pitch yet. I'm working on it.
That's a great pitch right there. Don't lose
Yeah.
any of it.
Yeah.
You have, I think, like 600,000 or 700,000 followers on Instagram, and I don't know how many on TikTok because I'm a true millennial. I don't know TikTok very well, but
That's all
you have a
right.
huge following, and
Yeah.
you've drawn a lot of attention to these important issues. I think that's so valuable, and we talk all the time. I live in Orange County now, and I think it's really helpful to have people who can speak to both worlds because
Yeah.
whatever we've been doing for the last few decades, we need to start thinking of new ways to revitalize rural America because it's not working. Our young people are leaving.
It's
There's a
not. Yeah.
brain drain in most small
Yep.
towns. Um, and, I've been advocating for my small town that I come from that will always be my heart losing their water, losing their hydroelectric dams, which, by the way, are 100 years old. They generate electricity through water. They actually work, but they're not classified as green energy.
Hmm.
It's a story for another day. But, we need people who can communicate these stories. Although I do think a lot of farmers and ranchers can do that. And if they get online and tell their story, they will find a willing audience and a receptive audience because I
Mhm.
believe this is a good country and we care about our
Mhm.
rural neighbors. We care about each other. What would you say to people who may have an issue like this in their small town that they want to call attention to? They don't have any social media experience. How would you encourage them to be a voice for these rural issues?
You know what's funny? I'm gonna promo Facebook here, believe it or not. Yes, I know if you're Gen Z and hearing that, you're gonna say, "Oh, I deleted my Facebook. It's where all the old people are." I get that. I get that, but hear me out. Facebook has become the most impactful social media platform for communal engagement. I see every town has a Facebook group or a Facebook page where everyone will congregate on these issues. So I've joined like 100 of these groups for,
Oh,
around the
that's my
country.
favorite thing in the world.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but my unhinged small town Facebook group, it brings me so much joy.
Yeah, I mean, they're entertaining, that's for sure, but I do see, people all the time will just start a new group for a specific like, if it's a battery storage coming to your town, they'll name the group, Town Battery Storage. I see such impactful, effective grassroots organizing going on inside those groups. And you don't have to be an influencer, you don't have to have any followers on Facebook. You can just start the group or join the group. And Facebook pushes groups and pages because it knows it's like one of its strongest features to keeping people on Facebook. If they stay on Facebook, they make money. It pushes groups and pages. So just like you want to start one, make sure you have the keywords in there, like the town and what you're mad about. And people will find your page. They'll join the page. They'll start chatting in it. I find every group has its like me in it. Like every group has its person that is like willing to be up at midnight, like researching everything, flipping out and posting it publicly. It's like that person will appear if you don't want it to be you. Every town has that person. And I watch just very effective organizing going on. And, the second thing I always say is you have to stay on top of your local government. This is where a lot of these things, bad things are originating. You have to start going to the town board meetings and the zoning board meetings. They are two separate boards. There's also a planning board. That's what's annoying. There's three boards. The planning board, can be also where stuff can be uncovered, who's applying for what type of business. The zoning is where they're going to sneakily change your zoning on you. And then the town board is going to be where just like the biggest issues are discussed. So if you really want to get on it, go to all three of those board meetings. They always happen once a month. If you go, there'll be a website you guys can find that on, and you will be able to at least have a beat on what's happening. If you don't like public speaking, you don't have to speak at these things. You can sit in on them and report it back to the Facebook group or Facebook page. And there will be a token extrovert there, that will appear and hear what you have to say. But you don't have to be an influencer to do any of that. It's just local government, which like the founders of our country wanted us to engage in. I don't really think we were meant to be this aloof to local government.
Yeah, that is great advice. What happens in your hometown eventually becomes what's happening in your county, your state.
Yes.
It trickles up. So that's where it all starts. And, we learned this during COVID, but your local government impacts your daily life a lot more than you realize, probably more than the federal government in many ways. And because we all see what goes viral on social media and what makes people mad in the podcast space and what's making headlines, we tend to think, nationally or what's happening at the world stage. But what happens in your local town probably impacts your life the most. And I would love
It does.
I would love to help encourage a kind of a return to that local mindset. And we're not just losing our agriculture, which you and I both on our platforms talk about a lot. We're also losing our American small towns. And I think that is such a loss. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Just our small towns are becoming endangered. And these are the places that they have personality, they have their own unique traditions, their own unique voices, their own unique culture. They're so precious. If you have a small town that you think of when you think of the word home, those places are going away, and we have to start paying attention to that, not just agriculture, but these small towns that, if we can't fight to save one American small town, what is this really all about?
I should play that before I speak at things. Yeah, you said that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it's the end of our country kind of as we know it in a way, if that patchwork of those small towns, anyone who's driven cross country, it's just one small town after another. And that's something that makes this country unique, and it makes this country what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen this a few times now, but it's true. If you want to hate your country, read about it on the internet or read the news. If you want to love
Yeah.
your country, drive across it.
Yes, I think I saw that recently, and it's so like profoundly correct. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Get in the car. So if someone is listening right now, if they're a farmer, they're a rural landowner, they've been approached by a solar company with a leasing offer, what would be the first thing you would tell them?
That's like one of those questions. I have to be careful how I answer it because then everyone thinks I'm like anti whatever. I would say, okay, look, like you have free will. If you are strapped for cash, like if you're dying on the vine, you need money. I would say there are other ways to get that money for your land. You can put a conservation easement on it, an agricultural easement. You will get cash for that. You can get grants from the USDA if you turn a portion of your land into a native garden that people can see on Sundays. I would just say there are other quick ways to get cash if you're ready to lock up some of your land, which is what the solar will do. It will lock up your land. It will not be farmed land. So if you need money and you're ready to lock up some of your land, I'd say write to me. I will help you. There are ways to get quick cash if you're ready to lock up some of your land. One. Two, the solar companies are poaching you. They don't care about you. Many of them will dissolve or file bankruptcy in the next 3 to 5 years. If you look that up, almost all of them do. They do that to get out of decommissioning costs. So if you agree to put this solar complex on your land, that company's not going to be around in 5 years when it's time to take it apart. And you might say, oh, but the panels last 20 years, I thought. I still defer to look up how long these complexes actually last. They don't last that long, including that Ivanpah one, however you say it, out in California. That was such a failure in the desert there. That one didn't last as long as they promised it would either, and that was in the desert,
That
hey,
was in the desert,
I was
right?
in the
You'd
freaking
think if
desert,
any
okay?
solar
Like,
farm had a shot, it would be that one.
yeah, these solar companies do not care about you. They don't care about your land. They are lying to you. And that money you think you're going to make so fast, you're going to be out when it's time to decommission, because baked in the contract you're going to sign are some decommissioning clauses. And the solar company might say, no, we put up 100K a bond, or like we put up 100K for the decommissioning. You'll be all set. You're all set. There's all sorts of caveats and clauses in that contract. They're counting on you to not have a land use attorney review that contract. And unfortunately, most rural families are not having land use attorneys review the contracts. And they know that. These people know that. These are corporate sharks being dispatched out of big cities and foreign countries. So they know you don't know that. And inside of the contracts are clauses that, yeah, there is 100K unless they file bankruptcy. So if they file bankruptcy, decommissioning is on you, and decommissioning is very, very expensive. It's millions of dollars, which is why they don't want to decommission. It's going to fall on you. And if you're 80, if you're thinking about doing this, it's going to fall on your kids. It's going to be an awful legacy. It's going to be an awful thing that was kicked down the road. And I know you might not know that, but that is just the reality of what is occurring with this. And a lot of people are regretting signing these contracts. So I'm not saying that to crap on people's free will. I'm just sharing what I have learned to be true. And at this point, because I flipped out for 6 months about this, I have had hundreds of people whistleblow to me, send me contracts, share heartbreaking stories, and it is becoming known that that's unfortunately something that's occurring with this. So I would just say, if you need fast cash, there are ways to get fast cash that involve locking your land up for nature things, as opposed to solar panels.
Yeah, it's not free will if you don't know what you're signing. So
Right.
you're just advocating for real free will here. Real quick on side note on that, where the Fort Edward solar plant, where does that stand right now? You said it's basically about to be implemented.
Yeah. So they're rushing. They want the federal tax credits that are going to be sunsetted by July 4th, 2026.
Okay.
So they're rushing a lot of these right now in upstate New York, and it's expected they're going to issue a final permit to it in the next month, but in the next 4 weeks. We are expecting that. Um, it's like I always keep saying the cliche, it's always darkest before the dawn. I keep feeling that with this, that it's gonna have to get a little rough before it gets better, and they do have to issue a final permit for us to be able to sue. There has to be something you are suing over, and by them issuing a final permit, that would allow us to engage a lot of things we have planned here. A lot
Okay.
of preparation has gone into. Um, so we
Okay.
are bracing ourselves for that. Despite everything that was shared with them, 99% of the time they issue a final permit anyway. The only time they didn't in all, 32 projects is because the corporation had financing problems. So pretty much 100% of the time it's rubber stamped. So
Wow. So your fight is really just heating up here.
kind of,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, you've said, and I love this, buy American farmland before corporations do. That's kind of
Yeah.
your mission. What do you want the legacy of this fight and your involvement in it to be?
I mean, I don't need a legacy for I want to know, one day, if I am dead and gone, that our country it has reached its communal nature potential that it looks like it does in the postcards, that there's waterfalls without PCBs flowing through them, that there's families growing food for their neighbors, and there's animals not dying from poisons they ingested underneath solar panels. That's what I want my legacy to be. Um, I guess it's a spiritual one. I believe God made nature perfect, and I just want people to leave it the hell alone. That's all I'm asking for. Yeah, that's it, and I'm tired. I'm just
Beautifully said.
tired. It's just leave it alone, please. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about the massive wealth transfer that's about to happen here soon with boomers passing on farmland to the next generations, and who gets
Mhm.
that farmland could change the face of our country and what it looks like, not just out here in the West, but also in upstate New York, which I always feel a lot of kinship with New York because, like New York, California is known for our massive metropolitan areas, but I think our true
Yeah.
heart and soul is agriculture, and it's
Mhm.
very ignored and drowned out by our cities, which are destinations for people who come to California or New York for one thing and have slowly corroded the soul of what makes these states special. So it's worth fighting for. And Alex,
Mhm.
you're amazing. Thank you so much for all your time. Anything else you want to add? Where can people read more, donate to your nonprofit, follow your fight?
So the nonprofit's American Land Rescue Fund. I tried to make it as obvious as it is. It's just AmericanLandRescueFund.com is the nonprofit website. You can also read our environmental assessment is on there. It's a PDF you can read. And I pretty much crash out the most actually on Facebook and Instagram/YouTube, and I'm just Alexandra Fasulo in all of those places. To my knowledge, there is not another Alexandra Fasulo crashing out, so I should come up. Unless there's another
Awesome.
one, I don't know, but I don't think so.
Well, thank God there's one. Thanks,
Yeah.
Alex. You're amazing. Appreciate you. Thank God that you're out there doing this and fighting for these issues that are so, so important. Appreciate you. Thank you for all your time.
Thank you, Keely, for letting me talk about it. Thank you.